advice there. Stay out of the sunshine. Find a TV show to pick. They're probably going to recycle a lot of 2020 in 2024. Civil War, World War III, World Civil War, Civil War 33. How many civil wars have we had? It seems like it's just a label, a current thing that's not really attached to any real escalation. But when we get burnt out on World War III, they say Civil War, and we get scared again. Tonight I want to talk about MAGA ACKBAR, Satanic Panic on the TRAD Right, which is a reference to America Fest, which is going on right now. And in 2024, I won't be missing any of these events. If I'm not there, one of us will be there. This event looked like a great deal of fun. It's basically Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk, Turner Diaries. It's a huge honeypot, really, to smear the American right as Christo-fascists, which is right now what they're about. And they're talking about the need to, like, for example, just the other day, I pointed out the statue, the satanic statue that was erected at the city capitol by the Temple of Satan. And the satanic statue was torn down by some kind of independent activist who was motivated by his faith. He was a former military officer. And I thought this is interesting because now you have the far right on the side of screw free speech. Like they don't even care about free speech in principle. It doesn't apply to religions they don't like. BBC U.S. man charged over damage to satanic temple display. Now, it wasn't any more offensive than what I see around my neighborhood with the Halloween decorations. But he took this horn statue to be some kind of an affront to God, and on those grounds he attacked it, and he's being applauded. And so he actually gets a place at America Fest. He actually gets the mic. And now, to explain how significant this is, America Fest is Charlie Kirk, it's Jack Posobiec, Tucker Carlson, all these very well-known. Looks like the governor of Arizona, former governor Kerry Lake, the soon-to-be politician and walking roadkill QAnon shaman is there as well. So it's a big deal. So here's a nobody who destroys a statue, and now he's hanging out and rubbing shoulders with friends of Donald Trump, like 1 degree separated from the president. If I go destroy and deface some kind of display, I'm not going to be platformed. I'm just saying it's probably a psyop. And I was listening to Jack Posobiec, Human Events, and the rhetoric from that side, and they're all doing the same thing. And I've noticed this in trends, like all at once. They're like, we must lower the age of consent and tell women to stay home. And now they're actually doubling down on that, bring back the patriarchy, this type of stuff, and they're cheering. But I've noticed the trends, like get out of the cities, and they're all sharing the same stuff about subways. Get out, get out, get out. And then we have the Jordan Neely, Daniel Penny subway strangling incident, which apparently, and I think I agree with Synchromorpheus, was directed by Jordan Peele. And Get Out is one of his movies, and Get Out was a right wing catchphrase for getting out of the cities. I'm just saying that was uniformly expressed by all the same talking heads on that same side. So recently, they've all gone full blown satanic panic. That's where they're at. They're saying we must stop Satan, no more Satanism. We had Nick Fuentes saying we need to go after the people doing rituals and the witches. So they're calling for a real witch hunt. Fuentes even called for extermination and execution of Satanists, witches, and warlocks. I mean, I'm pretty sure the next thing is burning Harry Potter books. But this trend is picking up, and now it coincides with Tucker Carlson coming out saying that UFOs are real, and the government has known about them since the 30s, but they're not space aliens, they're demons. And this comports with what MTG was saying months ago about how aliens are demons. And what I pay attention to is when all the people who are plugged in to the same side of this political horseshoe start saying the same exact thing. That's kind of an indicator that there's a talking point going down. And so now we're getting this discussion about aliens and the right wing considering them to be demons, which is something I've said for some time that if they do arrive, it's not going to be unifying as Ronald Reagan said and suggested. It won't be unifying at all. It'll be specifically partisan. In fact, the aliens are going to be leftist, liberal, globalist, World Economic Forum types who are only coming down here to tell us not to screw up the planet anymore, to give up on our capitalism. That's where it's leading. But it's fascinating that we're seeing these voices on the right, and it's not insignificant. I mean, Tucker Carlson is claiming to have inside information. Even though he's a populist, he can't share it with us, but he specifies. Here's a Vanity Fair. He's been saying this for some time, but dark is the phrase. Dark. What does that mean? What does it mean that these demons are um, going to be presented as aliens? Very interesting developments. And then the Civil War stuff. We talked about this the other day. There was a shooting in Prague, blood all over the stairs, iconic marble stairs. At the same time, there's blood all over the Lincoln Memorial, fake blood. You could say fake blood in both, but one of them is designated real. So, blood on the stairs, what does that mean? But it happens in front of the Lincoln Memorial as Biden has the Civil War Reconciliation Memorial taken down. Then, this guy claiming to be Captain America happens to be 33, tries to break into a military base with an AR-15. And it's Captain America, I learned from a listener, who starts the Civil War in that movie. And News is a movie for all intents and purposes, the way it's scripted, and these plot lines do often align. They're synchronized. And you would be a reality denialist if you said it wasn't so. If you said leave the Obamas behind, I mean that movie was is just so ham-fisted, and it's not only it's not even a subtext. It's pretty blatant. It's like hate the West, hate Whitey, racial reckoning, America's got to fall. It's not too subtle about any of it. But the fact of it is, the movie comes out and it happens to coincide with, quote, real life news events like Tesla's being recalled, a reference to the movie. The Chandler Bing slash Matthew Perry death and his connection to Julia Roberts also provides a number of fascinating links. But then you had the hacker situation with Chinese cyber hackers getting into our infrastructure, just like the movie. And there was even a blackout in New York shortly after. And these are just incidents we're pointing out because they coordinate Netflix releases with the upcoming news cycles. This is evidence of news bending. They don't just bend the horizon, they bend your reality through bending the news. And I can point to many examples. In fact, Donald Trump's going to be in court on 3/4, although Laura Logan thinks that he's going to be taken out before then. 3/4, I brought up last year, March 4th, no, 2 years ago. No, it was last year, that March 4th, 2022 was the release date for the Batman movie. And I said the coded message would be March 4th, right wing terrorists. Which I was right, and we discussed this at length. The movie, the 11/6 flooding of Gotham by the QAnon slash Riddler's online army, getting activated to flood the polls. 2022 midterm slogan for the GOP was flood the polls. I mean, come on, the Batman movie, flood the polls, literally happens in real life. They didn't actually get their red wave, but anyway, the movie came out on 3/4. And on that same day, Joker Sarnaff, the Boston bomber, had his death penalty reinstated. More connections. And then, of course, we had the subway shooting in the one subway cart that didn't have any CCTV by, was it Frank James with his 33 rounds? Fascinating psyop. We watched that one closely. And there's people on the ground not bleeding. And then someone with a red trench coat walks by and drops off squibby bags, blood bags. It was just ridiculously fake. It was actually comical. But the guy who did the shooting, Frank James, was called the Prophet of Doom. And he had 500 followers online, just like the Riddler. And like the Riddler, he was heckling the mayor for not doing enough for the mental health services and the mental health crisis. So another parallel. Same thing with Joker. They're victims of the system. They're mentally ill. They're not being treated. They're left on their own. The subway represents the underclass that the people high up in their jets don't see. The ones who are causing the climate change that disproportionately affects the poor. You can see it's all class warfare. These movies are actually agitprop top to bottom. And there's a few more things, in fact, I was thinking about today. Because Jack Posobiec, again, if you don't know who he is, Human Events, he's a big deal because he is the guy who really kicked off Pizzagate, live streaming from Comet Pizza. And Pizzagate is a new satanic panic. And he's glowingly describing at Phoenix, at this America First event, he's describing how He is of the generation, the son, the children of the original Satanic Panic mothers. The ones that panicked over Dungeons and Dragons. Well, this is right out of Stranger Things, the TV series Stranger Things about the Satanic Panic in the 80s. And I pointed this out because Posebek made a big deal about Audrey Hale being a Satanist and how she shot the stained glass of Adam and killed Christian children and had a manifesto. And he said she was in hell. And he did a countdown. Like, Audrey Hale has been in hell for 2 weeks. Well, the whole movie Stranger Things is about this character who looks just like Audrey Hale, Elle, going to hell. It's the underworld thing. But anyway, there's a lot of Stranger Things tie ins to the mass shooters of 2023 that were coming from the political left, including the July 4th shooter last year, which was another tie in. What I'm pointing out here is that Jack Posebek's narrative has been to terrify the right wing about Satanism and to get them to suddenly care about mass shootings. Because primarily the right didn't care. They just blamed it on SSRIs and waved it off. Like, you're not going to get my guns. They didn't care. Now that a Christian school has been shot up by a left wing trans activist ideologue, according to Jack Posebek, that's what he's describing her as, that she was radicalized online, now they care. In fact, the Nashville Covenant shooting is the right wing Sandy Hook. So he's been building up this satanic panic thing for some time. He participated in an exorcism of Dodgers Stadium after some drag queen nuns performed there. Now, I'm saying this is all theater. I don't believe that they actually believe any of this stuff. But they're really hyping it up. They're hyping up the Satan stuff and then Tucker Carlson, the Satan stuff. Anyway, so Posebek says that the number one movie of the year is Sound of Freedom. And after everyone cheers, he reads from like Ephesians 6:11 about putting on the full armor of God. Now think about it. Ephesians 6:11, armor of God. 6:11 is a major key number whenever you talk about the Turner Diaries and the right wing. And this is that turning point. So I'm emphasizing this Turner Diaries connection because, of course, it was Timothy McVeigh, motivated by the Turner Diaries, executed on 6/11, the right wing domestic violent extremist, OBL. But the 6:11 stood out to me because that's the full armor of God is a big right wing catchphrase. And so it has a biblical 6:11 reference. And he mentions Sound of Freedom, which has this key scene where human trafficker in real life, Tim Ballard, gets this pendant that has Tim 6:11, Timothy 6:11, some Bible verse. So another 6:11 with the name Timothy, as in Timothy McVeigh, associated with the same faction politically. It's very nuanced, but I'm just pointing it out that in the same sentence he invokes this twice. And we've been pointing out the 6:11 because it all ties in not just to the death of McVeigh, but the future domestic violent extremist 9/11. It all ties into the nuke, even down to in Oppenheimer, he's wearing a badge that says K6, like 11/6. The film is 11 miles long, weighs 600 pounds, like the Batman movie, underwater because of the right wing extremists on 11/6. It's an inverted 9/11. Just pointing it out that the right wing is being hyped up about the threat of Satanism, literally. And it's interesting because they're also openly espousing a return to patriarchy and TRAD right. They're now the TRAD right. So what you're seeing is the extremes going more extreme. That's exactly what you're saying, and we've seen the buildup all year. Get out of the cities, go rural, focus on growing your families and having a bunch of babies out in the farms and stay away from the subways. They've been building this up for some time. I call it the MAGA ban, and they're Make America Great Again. Yeah, they want it to be MAGAstan, and getting rid of false idols, breaking statues. Yeah, that's very much on brand. In fact, I made this point a few years ago. I said, look, this is the domestic equivalent of radical Islam. Instead of being radicalized by the Quran, it's QAnon. Instead of terror cells, it's incels. Holy warriors who are sexually repressed. Same thing. What are they attacking? What are incels attacking that the jihadists aren't attacking? It's the same thing. Uh, in fact, It's like the West, it's the great Satan, it's the deep state, it's the media, specifically Jewish media, as they would say it. And you see all these overlaps between these domestic and these foreign terrorists, where it's a one for one matchup. And I've been saying they've been building this up, and it's certainly going somewhere. In fact, there's more because I hear often on the far right, they're constantly complaining about women uncovered in the gym. And again, I point this out because I listen to a disparate group of podcasts, and they all get the memos on the same day. It's an echo chamber. You get those videos where you hear the mainstream media and they all say, and this is a threat to our democracy. And then you hear five other news stations, and 10 and 20, and it just goes exponential until you have a chorus all saying, this is a threat to our democracy. You get the same thing with the alt media. It's just not as big. But you have to have this broad-based, what we call metascript perspective. All right, let's see who has joined us. I sent out text alerts, so we should have an influx to the raft. All right, we are joined by Diggs, Thustazar, Destiny, McDirtywork, Diana South, Peace Circle 360, Wheeze, Invalus, Ears Up, Gematria 101, Lord Laney says Auto Hoax O'Clock. Ooh, Gematria 101 says Civil War lasted 3 years, 11 months. Jay Diggs says, I think he's running for office. Yes, yes, the walking roadkill, QAnon shaman. They're trying to call him the American shaman. They're trying to erase the fact that he was running into the Capitol for Q. Look, if I served 27 months in prison because of some anonymous shitposter, I would get subpoenas out there. I would find out who it was. No, nobody seems to care. But they will once it gets out, and we're behind that. I'm not going to spend any more time on it till I have updated information. The next thing's a hearing. Okay, let's see what we have here. Elephant Tusk says, stay in the middle and you won't get caught up in the drama. It's all about creating extreme polarization. Yet neutrality, suspension of judgment, saying, I don't know. And when someone tries to rush you to make a decision or you're bad, for example, Ben Shapiro. Ben Shapiro was like, if you're not enraged about the 40 dead babies, then you're not my friend and you're an anti Semite. It's like, wait a minute. I need to find out if I can even trust the news. And nobody wanted there to be 40 dead babies more than him. And my thinking here is, of course, he buys into the agitprop as everybody else does and reacts emotionally when something strikes him for personal reasons, as most people do. People will say, don't say that because I know somebody who knows somebody. And I used to get that a lot, and I called it out. You have to be irreverent to be an auto hoaxer. You really do. It's like you couldn't be an atheist challenging some theocratic state without being willing to blaspheme or contradict it. And sometimes you have to be irreverent. When you had that truck attack in Nice, which was around Christmas time a few years ago, I was scolded and banned from YouTube chat by, I think it was Paul Joseph Watson himself from InfoWars at the time. Paul Joseph Watson was screeching, "No auto hoaxers. Don't call it fake. It's not nice to the families. What if you knew somebody who knew somebody?" It was all that. And so I got banned for Nice. So I'm streaming about it on my own channel, and I get some random in the chat, and he's like, "Why are you calling these people fake? That's my girlfriend." I'm like, "Your girlfriend is a rubber training dummy dumped out of the back of a truck?" And even if that was true, even if this guy's girlfriend was dead in the street or dying in the street because she got hit by a truck, why is he on an obscure YouTube channel of fringe media analysts instead of being at the hospital at her side as she's dying? And I asked him this. I said, "Why aren't you at the hospital? You're over here trying to make sure that I believe it. Go take a selfie with her." But we don't get that so much anymore because it can't stand up to scrutiny. I used to get people calling in saying, "I know somebody that died on 9/11." I'm like, "What's the name?" "Oh, I don't want to say." Come on, it's public info. Give me the initials. And they'll be like, uh, BX. I'm like, I look it up, there's no name. I've had so many people lie. Crisis liars. Almost as bad as crisis actors. I respect crisis actors because, I respect the grind. They're working, it's their craft, they're getting paid. Some of them worked out deals and they're doing what they have to survive. They're not in the Screen Actors Guild, they don't have the same protections, and likely they'll be replaced and phased out with AI. But the Crisis liars who lie online and aren't getting paid for it, I have zero respect. Like, what are you doing? You're on the wrong side of the screen and you're covered in fake theatrical blood and you're crying for fake dead people. Like, where are your priorities? What about the real victims? Save your loosh for the real victims of the mind war. The trauma induced mind control victims in this mass Stockholm Syndrome society. Elephant Tusk says, stay indifferent. See, we have something here. It's called the overview effect. The astronauts claim to have it. They're lying. They claim that they've gone so high up into space that when they look down at the Earth, they don't see nations or political factions. Nope, they just see one and one world to protect. And they come down super elevated and they tell us to do better because they're so elevated now. Well, that's a bunch of crap because they don't go high enough and they're lying. None of them have had that effect. They didn't have a cognitive shift. They're trying to say they've had a cognitive shift called the overview effect. We've had the cognitive shift. If you have removed the digital hoodwink and stepped back from the screen, and the mainstream mediation is your primary frame of reference, and you still include objective reality in your overall view, then you've had the overview effect. You have already transcended the world stage. So you don't have to get in the middle. The middle's blue pill, dream world, kind of safe, but also scared and apathetic. Like I was driving with the blue pillar and they said, "Hey, you hear about all those dead babies?" And I was like, "Yeah, nice weather today." And they're like, "Yeah, it's great. Let's go hiking." Just like that. And the thing is, they believed in the dead babies. I knew it was a hoax, so I didn't care. I was like, "Let's talk about the weather." And they were like, "Yeah, dead babies sad. Let's go hiking." And I'm like, "Well, I'm not apathetic because if I thought those babies were real, I would have I would have responded appropriately, but I knew it was fake." So, no, the middle is generally milk toast, lukewarm, fence squatter, uh, I guess comfort in the herd. So the middle's not even a safe space. Plus, you're the target on the left and on the right of the mind war itself. The best space to be, I believe, is again above the fray, outside, beyond the perimeter of acceptable discourse, out here where they censor us, out here in what they say is the darkness. This is we're in the no man's land. We're not supposed to be out here. We're beyond the border line or the border. Yeah, they call it the borderline content. I always hated that. Like, wait, borderline content. So you have the acceptable content in the middle here, and we all have to face towards it. And at the edge, yeah, we gotta get rid of that stuff. But what happens when you push it all off the edge? Well, now what was formerly a layer away from the edge is now the new edge. Well, the new edge is offensive. You got to push that off, and eventually you shrink the universe of ideas. And in order to be rooted in objective reality, you have to account for what they don't put into your frame of reference, what they omit. So we spend a lot of our time on the omissions, on the puzzle pieces that don't fit in the puzzle that they give us, the complete picture. Like, yeah, this is the completed puzzle, and I'm like, well, what about these extra pieces and all those obvious gaps where you forced the pieces in? And it doesn't even make sense. It's like abstract. All right, let's see what else we have here. Diana South says the Abraham Lincoln statue is 19 feet tall. Joined by Shannon Jones, Isabel Ann. And if you got the text alerts, I want to say thanks to all those who've been putting in the super chats. That goes right into paying for credits. That's one of the main things I put it right into because it's worth it. We've been cut off from so many platforms. I realize we need to have our own separate notifications so we can be on our own page no matter what happens. Portal Complex says the owner of Comet Pizza was a curved pervert. Tunnels didn't reach the White House, but you know what? I watched this show. I'll have to remember what it was called. And there was a scene where they go into the basement of a pizzeria and there's a ping pong table. And one of them says, I remember there being a door. And they look and there's a place in the wall where it had been patched over. I've seen references to it. Isabel says 47 items of property seized from Audrey Hale's home. Elephant Tusk asks, how do you think it will end? Well, the end is a beginning. It's all cyclic. And I think you can guess the future by looking at the past. I think we're looking at also predictive programming as a predictive model. And they have these reset buttons, and the next reset button is the mushroom cloud or the psychological equivalent. So I'm very open to the mushroom cloud, the nuke being, or even like disease X, a mind virus, a mental, um, we'll say, an event that might be so disruptive that they have to block out portions of the internet and reset how we communicate because the free flow of information is creating monsters. And remember, the director of Civil War, which is coming out in the spring, directed 28 days later about chimpanzees in a laboratory who caught rage viruses by watching US media. So they're watching fake news thinking it's real and they get really violent. So the messaging here, though, is that all the free speech is responsible ultimately for everything from the virus spreading because the anti vax precedes every pandemic to mass shootings because the mentally ill are susceptible to mind viruses. And this latest shooting in Prague is going to underscore this point because they're going to say, look, they've got gun control. Gun control can't stop a madman. It can't stop free speech. If only he hadn't fallen into this Twitter bubble, if only he hadn't gone into Discord or Telegram, none of this would have happened. And he was in Telegram. So I think it's pretty clear that they're. Well, okay, so how will it all end? I actually did a book called The Metascript Decoded. And in this, I was describing how the Great Reset is coinciding with the New Age, the age of Horus or Mars, which is this concept of a new world of, I think, sustainability, neo feudalism, an age, what Joseph Atwill recently referred to as an archaic revival. That we are being, I mean, humanity is being put into a simulation. Not a literal matrix simulation, but they're becoming very dependent on their internalized representation of the world more than their actual lived experience. And this has become increasingly severe as physical restrictions on mobility increase for whatever reasons they give us. So the metaverse heads are going to be disconnected from reality in the way that people who are deeply immersed in religious cults are. So it's nothing new. I wouldn't be surprised if they move people into Mars like bunkers, like Mars preparation centers. But anyway, the future is endarkenment. And what I mean is, as the masses go into an increasingly dumbed down, kind of like Wall-E. If you've seen Wall-E, it really tells the future. It shows how, in the future, mankind has destroyed the world. In fact, space is covered with space junk, so we get onto a space ark. The whole movie is basically a retelling of Noah's Ark. And instead of a dove bringing a branch to the ark, it's a white robot that looks like a dove that brings a living plant to show life is possible back on Earth, and it goes up to this space ark. But in this future, mankind is totally catered to by robots. They spend all their time staring at a screen in a recliner. Their muscles have atrophied, they're bloated and fat, they live in space, zero G, no effort. So the robot slave class has made it unnecessary for them to exert any effort of any kind. So they're a bunch of ignorant space cadets just floating around, completely decadent. And they're ruled over by a robot called Otto, which looks like HAL 9000. So they're on autopilot. Mankind is just there for the entertainment. And in a way, it's a very sad spectacle. But the ending, of course, is this big goal. It's a communist revolution, an agrarian revolution, because they say, hey, look, this technology is ruining us. Let's go back down to the earth and become farmers. Let's get rid of our technology and get in touch with the earth again. And that's where the movie ends. So it kind of shows that capitalism will eventually destroy the world. And throughout the movie, which is an animation by Pixar, which has the 113 stuff in it, 311, 113, they pretty much badmouth and demonize humans. And robots are looked at as sympathetic. Like poor Wall-E has to clean up after us, after these. And if you look at it from the Marxist class warfare perspective, the robots represent the poor, and Americans are the fat, decadent enslavers of the robots. All right, let's go ahead and continue here and going through your comments. One more thing. In the movie, the president declares Directive 113, and he puts on a gas mask, and it was the directive that means leave the world behind. It's no longer habitable. Okay, going through your comments. Fascinating. Elvin Tusk says, you don't think the whole useless eaters narrative is in play? No, I don't believe there's any agenda that involves extermination. And this is kind of interesting because Elon Musk has said the big war here is between the pro-human and the exterminationists. I mean, it's just science fiction with this guy everywhere. And actually, he comes out of a science fiction novel called Mars, a technical tale by Werner von Braun. But you got this guy's frame of reference being science fiction, saying it's about the people who want to get rid of humans and those who want to increase. And he says there's a population crisis, which is why I don't think it's anything. Elon Musk says there's a population crisis. Greta, or everybody on the left, is going to say there's a population crisis. They both agree. But one side thinks there's too many people. The other side thinks there's not enough. But nobody's exterminating anybody. The Georgia Guidestones were up for 42 years, and the population continued to climb. They blew it up with a cherry bomb. It's no longer there. Maybe they just said, screw it. We failed. We're never going to get there. And they destroyed it on 7/6/22, George W. Bush's 76th birthday, 42 years after the stones were erected. I'm pretty sure that's it. They realized, you know what, we're never going to maintain an optimal balance with nature. Plus, a lot of people were pointing to the Georgia Guidestones as a way to notice that the Earth doesn't seem to move at all by looking at the little hole where you could see the North Star. All right, let us continue here. I'm going to go through my notes. Laura Loomer says Jack Smith won't be getting his March 4th trial date. The deep state is going to kill Donald Trump. He must be protected at all costs. So, how is this? We've been responding to this Trump head wound stuff for years, and it's just because of predictive programming alone. And there's just a ridiculous amount of it. And now it's not even being hidden. Tucker talks about it. Alex Jones talks about this. Laura Loomer. They're all saying it like, yeah, it's fait accompli. It's going to be done. And this is part of Trump's martyrdom. If you remember, during Holy Week, they compared him to Christ. On 4/4, he was arraigned. 4/4 was the 55th anniversary of MLK's assassination. And at that point, Trump was being compared to Moses and to Jesus and to King David. But MLK was Moses, the promised land. And what is the promised land? MAGA. That's what the promised land is. It's MAGA. So here we go. They're chanting full armor of God at America Fest. Okay, America Fest. AF. 1/6. January 6. Waco. 1.6 million rounds. Dominion getting their lawsuit against Fox 1.6 billion. 1/6 is consistently, this January 6th reference is consistently showing up all over these events. Again, what is the armor of God? It's a passage that Paul uses in Ephesians 6:11, and it kind of makes an analogy between armor and protection from God and all this stuff. But again, Sound of Freedom #1 movie has Timothy 6:11, which I think is a Timothy McVeigh 6:11 execution date reference. Timothy McVeigh was radicalized at Waco, who were raided over 1.6 million rounds. Alex Jones was also radicalized at Waco and showed up at 1/6. All right, moving on here. Kind of a side note, but I want to contact that company that made the simulated George Floyd doll, Sigma 7, the one that was in the Twin Cities for, what, 33 years? And it was the first building, yes, 7 Sigma Incorporated of Minneapolis, leaving factory after being burned the first night of rioting following Floyd's death. And this is the company that makes the hyper-realistic training dolls. Not as real as the surgical ones that we've recently seen that were actually sent to Ukraine, where they can bleed and they can breathe. But I was reading about these things, and they can be done in very customizable ways. You could actually have anybody manufactured here. Just bringing this up because we're analyzing deep fakes in the age of, hyper realistic dead body crisis actors that are practically undebunkable. So it's important to remain apprised of the technologies that are available. But I considered ordering one. It's like, who should we style it off of? I was thinking MG. Maybe we could maybe just get the head to kick around on a soccer field. Impalable. I don't know. I'm just thinking that, again, we're at an age where if you're not already aware of the props and the magic tricks, you're going to fall for everything. And that's what we're seeing. So Joe here says Trump's assassination would kick off a civil war. Yeah, and we are saying it's fake. It's obviously a dead body. It's a hyper realistic training dummy. It's a squib. And what's going to happen? No one's going to listen. The unmediated mind says, I saw a YouTuber who says his brother died on 9/11, says he was at the Vegas Harvest Festival running lights for a country band that opened for Jason Aldean. Well, Jason Aldean was 33 on 9/11. Just a coincidence. Now, I would say this. Anybody who claims that they have multiple attachments to multiple events, if they're not operatives, they're confabulators. Like George Santos, who climbed up through the ranks there. I mean, he's up there in in government because he was so good at lying. He was a very successful politician based on his ability to lie. And he's like, my parents died on 9/11. I died in Sandy Hook. My grandparents died in the Holocaust. And people are just like, wow. It's like badges. But you're right. The Trump thing, it's an instigation. And we're seeing a lot of Civil War references. And the demonization of the other side is very big right now. The literal demonization. Here's a pretty good meme. Waiter, there's a fly in my soup. It's Klaus Schwab. He says, I know. The unmediated mind says this dude is definitely an operative. Oh yeah, yeah. If he's connected to multiple events because the actors share a backstage. Remember, the chief of police in Vegas during the Harvest Festival was also the chief of police in Maui during the fake dew attack with the Madu kids. What about the 1,500 kids? Aren't you worried about them? It's like, no, it's fake. Someone pointed out that the scenes out there in Maui with the lines of white cars was very reminiscent of the scene in Leave the World Behind with all the Teslas. Legal Man said it's pointless to try to talk to people about the fraud of government, which is using something that some people can't even think to see it or accept it because the government is spraying them like bugs. And my response was beautiful cirrus clouds. Thank you for sharing. I'm no longer debating whether or not chemtrails exist because I know it's a bad faith argument coming from an argument of, well, an appeal to ignorance, a loaded question, a shifting of the burden of proof. I'm not a fan. However, I do think that anthropogenic cirrus clouds are beautiful, and I'm willing to argue on the aesthetics. So if you want to call in and debate me and describe to me how lines of ice crystals across the sky are ugly, I'm all ears. But I'm convinced that these things are the opposite of ugly, and I'd be willing to get some experts. Like, I draw, I paint, I don't say I'm an artist necessarily, but I see a lot of art, and when I look at these cloud formations, man made, sometimes abstract when they spread out, I don't see the ugliness. And I think the people that do are just buying into a lot of cultural pessimism. So please, tell me how it's ugly. I'm all ears. Let's debate the aesthetics of chemtrails. All right, we just had the winter solstice, and this is again the opposite side of the year that we were on when the Titan imploded. So here's something fascinating. I was making connections between the Titan implosion and Godzilla imploding in the movie. And what do I mean by this? It's fascinating because I didn't know anything about the Manhattan Project detonation type, and you'll see here how I arrived at this. So Oppenheimer referred to the nuke as the destroyer. That's already established. Revelation 9/11 refers to a destroyer, and we talk about this quite a bit. So we've made this 9/11 references, but Godzilla is a nuke metaphor. So you could say that Godzilla is a destroyer. Now, what I came across yesterday is this. Again, the Titan going down to the Titanic, we have associated with this Godzilla because, of course, the destroyer and the Titanic being a symbol of the West, and of course, the sinking of the Titanic and the sinking of the Twin Towers have been correlated. We make this when you look at James Cameron was at the Titanic on 9/11 filming a documentary called Ghosts in the Abyss. Revelation 9/11 is about the destroyer in the abyss. So interestingly enough, we go back last solstice, which we enter Cancer. The symbol is the crab, which is the kraken, 6/9. Look at Godzilla turn 69 on 11/3. So the crab is the original kraken, and the Titan goes down on the day of Cancer, on the solstice. And the world is watching what happened to it. We lost contact. It turns out it imploded. So you have this implosion of this Titan. Now, here we are 6 months later, and I'm talking about the Godzilla movie because in the Godzilla movie, again, Godzilla, a kraken reference, a destroyer, a nuke metaphor, is destroyed when he goes to the bottom of the ocean. They drag him down so he implodes. So then I find this, referring to Oppenheimer. For both the Trinity test and the Fat Man, nearly identical plutonium fission through implosion designs were used. So in other words, I found some information here about the type of detonation. It says the project led to the development of two types of atomic bombs, a relatively simple gun type fission and a more complex implosion type. So the connection here with the implosion, the nuke, the destroyer, Godzilla, the Titan, and the Titanic connected to, of course, the Twin Towers, the Titanic, both symbolic of the West, and the incoming nuke. All packed in there neatly. And this implosion thing connecting with the Manhattan Project is just another layer to it. Gematria says Challenger explodes, 113. There's another piece of the puzzle there. Godzilla's birthday, 113. The One World Trade Tower opened on 113. So there's quite a lot there you can look at. You can look at the Challenger, the destroyer as a analogous symbol. But what are we really seeing here? The nuke metaphor now being associated with the sunken Titanic and James Cameron's work. James Cameron, Terminator 2, famously has the mushroom cloud on the west coast. Of course, T2, we're looking at JC versus T2. It's a lot of interesting symbolism here, but the main point of it all is we have already seen the predicted programming for the next 9/11. And it's coming from a guy whose fingerprints are all over the 9/11 PSYOP, almost as much as Kubrick's. All right, let's continue here. The Tucker was talking about flat Earth last month. Now he's talking about the Nephilim. Let me play this clip because Tucker Carlson, again, is part of the same far fringe political horseshoe right fake populist who can't tell you what he knows because he's not really one of you. But he's at turning point, and again, they're getting into the conversation about demons and how this is ultimately a spiritual war. It's another one of his talking points. This is not political, it's spiritual.
No one would care. It's like demonstrably untrue. That's why the flat earth people have been able to cruise beneath the radar for so long. Because and by the way, I'm not discounting that possibility for the record in case any are here.
Now, he did say he doesn't believe in the flat earth because he goes hunting and he accounts for the curvature of the earth when he shoots his rifle, which is interesting. I've never heard of anybody accounting for the curvature of the earth. Snipers or internet snipers, people who pretend to be snipers online, will expertly tell us about how, oh yeah, we account for the rotation of the earth all the time. So they're about to fire a round at a target far away. They bring out a calculator. They do a little math. They aim a little to the right. They hit their target. Accounting for it, they actually pull the trigger, and the earth rotates the target into the path of the bullet. But that's not what Tucker does. Tucker accounts for the curvature of the earth when he shoots at deer. Again, I don't know how that works. Okay, next.
Because I am an open-minded man. Present me the evidence of its flatness and I will amplify it.
Okay, well, the evidence of its flatness is it's self-evidently flat and stationary. If you say otherwise, you're lying. You cannot tell me that you experience the Earth as anything but flat and stationary. The best you can say is, okay, fine, it's flat and stationary from my perspective, but my TV screen, the movies, the TV screen, the media, it says it's a ball, it's curved. The pictures, the artwork, the models. Okay, I see. So your head is through the screen, you're wearing the digital hoodwink, and your interpretation of reality bypasses your individual perceptions, so you can be part of this collective perception. That's the definition of a world stager. And Tucker is a world stager because the burden of proof for the ball has yet to be provided unless you accept garbage science fiction flops as
The people who
evidence,
run our society, the
like the
people who run our
like the 25-year blooper reel we
the
called
people
Space
who run
Station.
our society consider themselves gods,
Okay, here's Tucker talking about Nephilim.
and that's
Boy,
why they're
they
not
do.
explaining.
They think they're more than human.
Oh, obviously.
Yeah, I go. They're not even human because humans care about their environment and their neighbors, and humans care about other people's children.
Of course.
And humans care about living things.
I love Tucker how his interview style is to get the most far out fringy person to just unload, and he just agrees with everything they say. There's nothing you've said that I disagree with. And it really gets them to open up. I like his interview style. Totally uncritical here.
Yes.
But they don't do any of that, and he goes, because they think they're more than human.
Oh, I noticed.
They
That's why
think
they
they're
want to live forever.
royals. They think they're like royals in a rarefied sphere of DNA or something above us. Like, did they come from another planet? When
I
you
can't
hear
speculate
people
on
talk,
that.
I can't either. But
This is the podcast to speculate on it, though.
well, because some people say, a lot of religious people, they're into.
Now, what you're seeing here again is just another comedian, conspiracy theorist, influencer, but they're all jumping on board this evil alien thing in preparation for the alien revelation. And the QAnoners are all about it as well. Oh, it's the reptoids are Democrats, and the Nordic and the blue avians are Republicans, and the grays are independents.
Some deep rabbit holes of things, and I don't know.
Well, you can see why they are, though. I mean, speaking for myself, I have no idea what's going on. I don't know if this is the Nephilim, right?
I was going to say.
I don't.
I know.
Here we go.
That's what I said.
No. Let
Not
me just
you,
say.
her.
I said
You're
I
fine.
don't know
Right.
anything about that stuff. Okay, I'm a
does.
very ordinary middle-aged man who spent his life following politics and
Right.
theology, but I do know that whatever's going on is very deep.
Yeah.
I've spent my whole life around politicians and seen decisions get made, interviewed.
Anyway, we're going to hear more of this, I'm sure, and there's going to be more people on the right espousing the belief that aliens are scary. Okay, what do we have here? I've been talking about how psyops follow art and life follows psyops. I was looking into this latest shooter in Prague and how he's kind of similar to many others. He has a diary like the Buffalo shooter posted online. And I was looking back and I was like, does he have a manifesto? Is he copying anybody? Because Anders Breivik, who plagiarized off of the Unabomber quite a lot, but Anders Breivik is the one in 2011 who had 77 victims on the Labor Party. Totally fake CGI character. We've looked into this one, but his manifesto has been recycled. They don't just recycle scripts and actors; they actually recycle manifestos. But anyway, I was looking up this character and it says, a study of Anders Breivik's rampage has echoes of American Psycho. And American Psycho is more or less a hit piece attacking not just Republicans, but toxic masculinity, really ahead of its time in its critique of straight, white, rich male, kind of the stereotype, and his obsession with products and the nuance of pop music was all meant to display how empty and shallow this system makes the people who are most successful in it. And it's just a big hit piece. So it makes sense that they would have a right-wing shooter identify with American Psycho. But the article here says he withdrew to a remote farm where he made his bomb, and in his diary, because a lot of these mass shooters are just very introspective and they all write diaries, he says between detailing his homicidal plans, he described himself as a refined individual dressing in expensive brand clothing as if he was channeling Patrick Bateman from American Psycho. Just another example. A Dukes of Hazzard actor suggests that somebody hangs Biden. He deleted the comment, but this is John Schneider, who's been visited by the Secret Service. Dukes of Hazzard, of course, the obvious association is what? The South. You're probably thinking the Confederate flag. But the federal agency charged with protecting the president and his families have opened a probe into the Dukes of Hazzard. And this comes a few days after after Biden's motorcade was hit by a car after he was asked about losing to Trump. I have a feeling that this is all fake, staged, part of a build-up. I don't know who this is, but Rampage Jackson, another MMA. Something else I pointed out recently. You're seeing these conspiracies popularized only among the comedians on the right and mixed martial arts and athletes on the right who epitomize what the left would see as toxic masculinity. They really make conspiracy theory part of the right. And that's because what a conspiracy theory is, in truth, if you're being completely honest, it's a theory about how things work, the best explanation, but this applies to both sides. Like, you couldn't say that global warming isn't a conspiracy theory. So why is chemtrails a conspiracy theory, but global warming isn't? So what I'm saying is, it's, kettle and pot. Both sides are essentially conspiracy theorists. However, the ones branded as such are on the right. And they've made this point and they've made this association starting from Joe Rogan on down. In fact, Joe Rogan is the reason why Spotify ramped up the censorship because of his use of the N-word, anti-vax, and now they're targeting, of course, this idea of toxic masculinity, which ties into the gun. Rampage Jackson has a flat Earth discussion with Brendan Schwab. He reveals his belief in the flat Earth. And what he says makes sense. He says the sun and moon is real, outer space is not. And one point, though, whether or not he's authentic, I can't tell you. But I do note that many of them aren't just repeating memes. They have their own thoughts on these things. Former UFC light heavyweight champion Quinton Rampage Jackson, regarded as one of MMA's first big draws, revealed he believes the earth is flat. He says, why do people care if people believe the earth is the way the Bible describes? Why do they get so mad? Now, here's where I differ. They bring the Bible in, and I think that is part of a gatekeeping operation, which says you can believe it on faith. It's no longer something you need to know by verification, i.e. science. So it's part of this false, rather, yeah, this definitely religion versus science split. And of course, it's by design. The concept of the flat earth question is really a question about worldview formation. It's philosophical. It has to do with epistemology, with faith, with trust, with power relationships between the elite and their knowledge monopoly and the masses. So the whole idea here of asking a question is, I think it's a fair question. Can we trust the powers that be on the big questions when, historically speaking, it seemed that they have a preference for ruling over illiterates? What happened to the first people to transcribe or translate the Bible into the common tongue, into the Vulgate? I think they were all burned at the stake. Same thing with the internet. They don't want you knowing the secrets of how media works. The mass media is the de facto world state church. They need you to be a literal believer in the contemporary myths. They need you to have that sheep to priest relationship with media. What we are doing here is, it's, in a way, it's, how would you describe this from their point of view? We have a lot of information that isn't meant to be out there, and the best thing I can do is ridicule it. And I'm not talking about the earth or its shape or stuff I can't verify right now. What I'm saying is, We have insights as to how media itself works and how it's really about worldview formation. So the fact that people have questions about their worldview is a very valid question. And again, you look historically at the ways that governments and religions have always made it their purview to censor people. I don't know why it's a laughable proposition that we can't trust them. Jackson asserts the sun is real, the moon is real, but outer space is not. He states that, oh, interesting, okay. So they don't agree on the matter, but one of them said something about photos of actual satellites in space are rare. Well, not rare, they're non existent. Show me a photo of a satellite in space and you get some airbrush image. You get something colored pencil. You get art. Let's see what we have here. The unmediated mind says, what would be the actionable objective of these events for the people who are carrying them out? Allegedly, right? Okay, it's control. It's simply that. The use of superstition, terror of gods, the use of pageantry to control the many by the few is ancient. They don't have the manpower to control everybody physically, but they do have mind control power over the masses. And I would contend that mass media has replaced and supplanted ancient superstitions. That we're not in an age of information, we're in an age of misinformation, and the information is really kept, as far as a cohesive understanding of how media works, it's in the hands of the privileged few. There's an esoteric aspect to it in a way. But the purpose of it is mind control. That's a huge part of it. That's the primary part of it. Just like the movie The Village, it explains it entirely. And so the question here is, do we live in a world of people who are so unruly that they need this? The movie Leave the World Behind made this a point. Julia Roberts' character said, we live in an agreed upon mass delusion because we're so terrible, indicating that we need it. And I think it might have been a reveal that, yeah, we do live in this situation because it's better than the alternative. So here's a Wikipedia article which talks about this concept. Here's from Polybius. He says, superstition maintains the cohesion of the Roman state. My own opinion, and this is what he's writing about here, is that if it were possible to form a state of wise men, it wouldn't be necessary, but every multitude is fickle, full of lawless desire, unreasoned passion, and violent anger, and must be held in by invisible terrors and such like pageantry. Oh, you mean like fake nukes? Like threats of World War III? Like fake demics? Like everything else we could name here? Mass shootings, simulated mass shootings, simulated terror attacks, simulated worldview warfare breaking out into these physical wars. Like they're making people think that all these characters they create on TV, like the radical Islamic terrorists that exist in the terror cells, or the bowl cut shooters in every classroom, they make people think these exist. So what do they ask for? More protection, more security. And we move into a maximum security society. How secure were we in 2020? We're all 6 feet apart, robotic, obeying the black cube because of what? Fear. The god of panic, Pan, and the panic-demic. And this is also why right now we're seeing with the right wing this invoking of the satanic panic. Because again, they're bringing this back. They're bringing back the moral panic for the traditional believers in old concepts of sin, for those who don't fall for the modern concepts, the replacement theology of virology and nasotology. But what they're doing works, and it's worked for a long time. And not only that, but there's no authentic challenge to it. The only challenger to the highly centralized and monolithic mind control apparatus that spans the entire world, the biggest challenger to it turned his back on the people he advocated for. If you look at Jones, Alex Jones, and his whole operation was don't let them see the forest. Keep them focused on one tree at a time. And that has been the operation. And unless you've had the overview effect, unless you've stepped away from the world stage and you recognize it as a separate construct distinct from the real world, that the TV, the screen, is not a window to the world but a filter, unless you've had that, you wouldn't see the forest. You'd be left, like everyone else in the truther community, is this next shooting real? I don't know, let's wait and see. Is this next one real? Okay, I think this one's fake. I think this one might be real. I think these kids did die, but that's definitely fake. So they think it's hit or miss. They think it's real until proven fake, and they fake us out whenever they can. That is an inverted epistemology. They're on the wrong side of the screen. They have accepted the screen as an argument from authority over their own perceptions. Stepping back from that, rejecting every premise until you can substantiate it, that halting, that suspension of judgment, that skepticism is the only way, I believe, that one can see the big picture without being an insider, knowing how it works. But even the insiders are going to be only let in on their compartment. It's very compartmentalized. So we are definitely insiders in many ways, which is why I gave the newspaper for the IPS the Insider is the title. Because we really are, we really are using the insights gleaned from inside information to arrive at a clearer picture of reality. Yesterday we talked about the winter solstice and Chinese space planes, and it says their unclear mission, which I think is an anagram for nuclear, but that's happening. Biden has been followed by a UFO, which could be a reference to the Chinese balloons from last year. MAGA ACKBAR, satanic panic on the TRAD right. The taking down of that satanic statue was one thing, an attack on free speech, but they brought the guy that did it to the stage at America Fest. The unmediated mind says the prison is very secure. Oh yeah, and look, we have a mission for 2024. Autohoaxology 101 is going to be released, but our mission is simply to aggregate anyone who has already figured out how this thing works to the extent that they recognize the world stage as a complete construct and they no longer accept the burden of proof as a primary, as a responsibility, like they're obligated to just believe it all unless they can debunk it. They don't have time, so they got to rely on truthers, and truthers only have half the truth, if that. But my objective is to build a network of anybody who's had this, what I consider to be off-world stage perspective, because when there's enough, we'll create a nice schism, a nice breakaway. We want to break off a large chunk of the political horseshoe, which is steering a lot of free thinkers back into the matrix. We're kind of going to create something of an exodus from Plato's Truman Show, this Plato's cave reality. But it's not going to work if you have to convince people they've been lied to, because a lot of the people are in love with their lies, and it's based on, again, it's about they're on the other side of the screen. It's about they accept it. They're believers. So you can recognize that mainstream mediated minds are believers, just like people who are part of a religion. And you can, it's not even an analogy, it's literally true. It is a religion. Just replace your definition of religion. It doesn't necessarily have to mean spiritual, just look at it as a world view, a regimented worldview. Only the Bible that gives you this worldview is the TV screen. And it's the ubiquitous universal Bible because it is the universal church. All right, I have some information from yesterday. We kind of got into this really quick. We were talking about concurrent programming. BBC aired Robin Williams' Family Guy's episode as news broke of his death. Very strange and surreal, but the main story is Peter Griffin was attempting to take his own life in the show, and everything he touched turned into Robin Williams because of a wish he made. I wish everything was Robin Williams. And apparently even a door turns into Robin Williams, and he hanged from a doorknob during the screening of the movie as the movie was playing. And the BBC said it was not intentional. They said this was scheduled more than 2 weeks ago, so it's just an uncanny coincidence. A BBC spokesperson told Yahoo UK. Just an uncanny coincidence. No, it's evidence of news bending. Something else I want to bring up. We've been talking about the symbolism of these numbers in the movie Leave the World Behind, how it even references the JFK assassination with the zip code 1963. The movie's released on 11/22. But 119 is heavily represented in the movie, which has to do with the Tower of Babel falling, has to do with Donnie Darko, which was released on that date. We talked about in our Discord server. It's very fascinating stuff when you get into these directors. His dad worked for NASA. The director of Donnie Darko did another movie where it involved twin nuke detonations, kind of like what we had in 2020 on the anniversary of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. We had those two explosions in Beirut. Kind of a weird coincidence. Anyway, we've made this correlation between 119 and the Tower of Babel falling, which again we've correlated with the Twin Towers or the Titanic. Well, I've often pointed out how the space station could also represent the Tower of Babel. One language, the internet, one mission, all the nations, international, one mission from Earth to space, so they're in heaven. And how the Tower of Babel falling would represent the disintegration of the unity that has everybody with this universal vision of heaven. So that's kind of what I think we're building up to, the fall of this Tower of Babel thing. But now, the movie Leave the World Behind made many references again to this Donnie Darko. They named it even by name. Planes falling, everything falling. So this new movie's coming out in January next month called ISS. ISS is about nukes by Russia hitting the world, and America and Russia are now fighting it out in the space station. And it's released on January 19th. So again, 119, the movie about this chaos in the ISS, is being released. Just pointing it out that I'm not sure exactly what this is going to mean, but I think it's part of the build up for the inevitable. In fact, the way I'm looking at it, I kind of think that the fall of the West has been theatrically and ritually played out for history in a series of events that tell the story over time. Sinking of the Titanic, the Twin Towers falling, and I think the space station, when the space program, the ultimate expression of man's hubris, his arrogance, thinking he can leave the Earth and go populate the world, I mean the universe, but he has to rise above his human nature, and he's not going to do it. Like, I think there's some kind of irony in this as the West falls, too big to fail, and it's coming. Don't Look Up made this very clear. If you haven't seen Don't Look Up, Leonardo DiCaprio is the agoraphobic scientist warning the world that in 6 months, 14 days, the world's going to be hit. 6/14 happens to be Trump's birthday, by the way. But in this movie, it's greed and capitalism that causes them to mine rather than divert the comet, which hits the Earth, which represents the Titanic being hit by an iceberg, too big to fail. You could look at the West as, of course, the Titanic, but the movie The Titanic starred Leonardo DiCaprio. So they used his visage, they used that face, they used that actor in order to solidify the connection between these two movies and these two concepts. And again, I mentioned James Cameron because James Cameron also directed The Titanic. And this came out in 1997, and it has the Titanic famously splitting in two like Twin Towers. It has jumpers and everything. So here's a guy who does 9/11 predictive programming on 9/11, hanging out at the Titanic. And as we've described, he has connections to the broader narrative of the nuking and sinking of the West. Not to mention, he has a $33 million mansion, and he took 33 personal dives to the ISS. A lot of 33s around 9/11. Like 1968, 9/11 became the official emergency number for America. The construction begins. 33 years later, they fall. America Fest 2023, again, Turning Point in Phoenix. And when I point out Turning Point is when they come to take the guns. Turning Point is referenced by the name, or it's a reference to Turner Diaries, which again, Timothy McVeigh, the American OBL, motivated and radicalized by Dave Koresh, 33, incinerated at the Branch Davidian compound. Simultaneously, Alex Jones was there, also being radicalized by that event, which is sort of the starting point for what we're seeing here with this Christo-fascist American nationalism, which is really, if you ask me, this is a straw man, and these are all agitators and provocateurs, and it's just run. I think it's just run by a bunch of bad actors. I've been following the speeches, and again, they brought the guy onto the stage, Michael Cassidy, who took down the Satanic Temple's statue. The organizers of the conference, Charlie Kirk, they say it's supported by right-wing multi-millionaires and dark money networks. It says here it's also a lot of people from Stop the Steal. Here you have QAnon shaman hanging out with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Jacob Chansley, he's going to be running for, he's going to be a politician. He and Alex Stein are going to be president and VP in probably 2028. After speaking in defense of the January 6th, quote, hostages, Greene posted a smiling photo of herself alongside the QAnon shaman who served 27 months. This year's conference coincides with the ongoing Israeli genocide in Gaza, which has provoked massive opposition in the United States. Anyway, we'll continue to follow this. My main point I wanted to bring up is that the right wing right now has embraced the values of MAGA ban by design, and QAnon was a trap. The QAnon was to give them a sort of radicalizing ideology that comes from this anonymous, shady source, but implicates the deep state, the great Satan, and instead of Quran verses, it's Q drops, but it's essentially the same thing. Lean Dion says theatrical Civil War lockdowns next year. Exactly. Yeah, Elephant Tusks. We did a deep dive, no pun intended, into the Titan collapse. In fact, my article on it, I think I said that it was directed by James Cameron. And you know what's funny is I said this before James Cameron even came out and commented on this thing. But I said that he directed it. So my first clue was it actually came out on the summer solstice. And we had this 3-day period where people were like holding their breath. What's going to happen? Let me go ahead and see if I can find the article that about James Cameron's directing of this. And I would argue he directed it. But there's a number of things that are notable here. Let's see what else we have. Okay, I have a breakdown of one of his movies. Oh, this is interesting. On the original timeline in Terminator 2, Judgment Day occurs on August 29th, 1997. Skynet is activated on 8/4/97 and becomes aware and launches nuclear missiles at Russia to incite a counterattack. August 29th on the Julian calendar is 9/11 on the Gregorian calendar. So just another connection between 9/11, James Cameron, and of course the Terminator flick. But that's not the one I'm looking for. I'm looking for the article I wrote on the Titan submersible. It's quite a story. I mean, it was dense. It was definitely a dense story. Here it is. The Titanic ritual continues. Here we go. The Titan submersible is missing and founded to have imploded during the summer solstice as we entered Cancer with the sign, the symbol of the 69. The submersible represents the crab having reached its highest point. And according to the Chaldean and Platonist philosophy, Cancer is the gate of men through which souls descend. So it's about a descent. And this thing descends. There's a strong link between the ocean depths and outer space in terms of their symbolic meaning. James Cameron descended in a submersible called the Deep Sea Challenger and visited the Titanic's remains 33 times. We've already talked about this. Again, Revelation 9:11. The angel of the abyss, his name is Abaddon, and that is the destroyer. NASA Expedition 69 lost contact for 90 minutes. That was a recent story. The first time that NASA lost contact with the ISS ever was around this time, and it was for 90 minutes, and it was Expedition 69. Just kind of a coincidence. The astronauts of Expedition 69 used a backup power system to reestablish communications through the Russian assets. Within 90 minutes, we were up and running. What I'm suggesting here, it's part of a continuation of the same ritual. But to continue here, the story seems to be that the Tower of Babel, the West, the dominant superpower, will be taken down, and the Deep Sea Challenger indicates a submarine borne nuclear weapon striking the US on the West Coast. And this is something I commented on before Godzilla came out. And Godzilla, again, turned 69 on 11/3, which has a specific connection. And 11/3 is also the date that we reference for the 2020 election, and it's connected to the symbol of the Kraken. Now, the Deep Sea Challenger, the destroyer, well, the destroyer is an Oppenheimer nuke reference. Godzilla is 100%, again, a metaphor for the nuke. Cancer, the crab, is a constellation, which, again, we're talking about a giant crab, which is essentially a kraken. But we did a deep dive onto it. I have a few more articles about this, but my main point was that it was a ritual. It was definitely something like a challenger. But instead of an explosion, it was an implosion. It was like an inverted challenger. One going up into space explodes, the other one goes down into the abyss and implodes. And then, most importantly, the Godzilla movie has a scene where they have to implode Godzilla. The Deep Sea Challenger, the Destroyer, all the symbols, all the terminology aligns succinctly and very cleanly here. Lieutenant Weinberg says, yes, Tim has said 33,000 times. I know. Yes, they're very repetitive. Elephant Tusk says they probably use the numbers and dates they align with harvesting energy during certain alignments and cycles. See, I'm doing some research with regard to that, and one thing I can say definitively, because there are people who will break down the Bible and look, oh, the Bible is the story of the Son personified, and it's just one example of how this can be done. And we often talk about the astrotheological nature of this paradigm and the cult that worships, it's all about space and time control and the cycles of time. It's encoded into so many mundane things. Look at your playing cards: 4 suits, 4 seasons, 52 cards, 52 weeks. Add all the numbers, you get 365. So it's pretty much integrated into stuff at a level that most people wouldn't be aware of. And just as these religions and the pagan traditions in particular are based on the sun and its position, the equinoxes, the solstices, and the in-between. So there's like this eightfold division of the year. And the mainstream psychological operations and pageantry aligns with the pagan calendar more often than not. The like 9/11 is the New Year's on the Coptic calendar, which is not insignificant as it relates to Sirius, which is the main star that they seem to venerate, the cults that run this place. Even every Mason Lodge has a five-pointed star for the blazing star, Sirius, the dog star. And in fact, in about 9 days, the world is going to celebrate the descent of Sirius, the ball dropping, the countdown. Yeah, well, Sirius reaches its highest point at midnight, and then it drops. It drops for the rest, and so we're like, what are we looking at here? Well, we're looking at the fact that the public is more or less ignorantly taking part in what you would call a pagan ceremony. Meaning, when I say pagan, I don't mean devil worship or anything like that. I just mean a religious paradigm that sees man as ritualistically taking part in the changing of the seasons, sort of like reenacting it. It's all based mainly on the agrarian stuff, but the star Sirius rings in the new year, says the dog star, Canis Major, the New Year star, you could call it, because it reaches its highest point at the stroke of midnight every New Year's Eve. It says here, if you're scanning the dark night sky, look for the prominent belt stars of Orion the Hunter. And Orion is also Osiris, by the way. And they point to Sirius. And when, of course, this is something from earlier this year, on 8/8, on August 8th, they call it the Lion's Gate, when Sirius enters Leo's, the constellation, where they say it's a Lion's Gate portal. Well, that was the date of Maui. That was the date Maui got zapped. Just kind of interesting timing. It says Sirius is at its highest point midnight every year. Astronomers call this the midnight culmination. So that's kind of what we're talking about here. So everyone's going to be celebrating a pagan ceremony very soon. Okay, let's see what else we have here. Going through your comments. Yeah, I don't think anybody's canceling Christmas. It's become sort of this culture war thing. And the Satanists love Christmas, if you notice. Like, go to any mall or something, and it's just like, Satanism isn't all that serious, but the right wing is creating a satanic panic. It's really just a fashion statement, if anything. And the Satanists who have their temple out there don't even believe in it. They even say that they're mainly just a pro-abortion group. It's just liberals in black. They're not the real satanic group who, even the real satanic group don't believe in Satanism in the sense of like the Hollywood version. They're still atheistic. They're just basically objectivists, I guess. Although they're not, because like the objectivists, they believe, I'm sure, in the conventional science. But now the Temple of Set. Now there's a group. The Temple of Set, Michael Aquinos, is an interesting group because they split off from the Church of Satan and they went on to worship Set, the Prince of Darkness. Again, Set kills the sun. We talk about these rituals all the time. The sun sets. But what's kind of interesting about this one is about Michael Aquino is that he wrote a book called Mind Wars, and I think this too might quite literally explain the world today. And it's not hard to find, but his book Mind War was about the art and science of psychological operations or something, and he was basically suggesting that that physical warfare was being replaced by culture wars and by mind war. And this guy is a lieutenant colonel. This was circulated around the Pentagon for some time, and it's made its way to the internet. But it does go a long way to explaining how the world works, how we're quite literally living in the Truman Show slash the Village. All right, this has been great. Thanks for your comments. We're going to be live tomorrow afternoon, more than likely. I'm going to spend the rest of the evening working on the IPS Insider, getting that ready for publication. There are new press passes available. If you go to infiniteplane.media, that's the place to go for both press passes and the paper. The next thing, of course, is to activate the reporters again like we did in 2020. And my objective is in 2024, we want to be in all the right places at the right times to get the best and clearest picture that we possibly can from an off-world stage perspective. And there are more of us than they would like us to know, which is the reason why they continually sabotage our networks. But this time we have something solid. We have a physical headquarters. The think tank is not roadworthy, but it's, well, I mean, it's not street legal, but I would say it's roadworthy. Like, we're ready to, I think, move to the next phase. Whereas most alt media platforms are married to social media platforms, alternative platforms, where they can be betrayed at any moment. We're now moving on to the above ground stage and getting into print media, which means we're no longer dependent on monetization from these ridiculous platforms with their ridiculous terms of service. But I think there are enough of us to effectively create this breakaway parallel media. Anyway, thanks again. This is Neo Mode Gucci Flip, Infinite Gang. Sign up for the newsletter at ips.monster if you want to get the archives.
Man, come on. You know it.
You're playing, man. Infinite things, man. The play society. Infinite plane, infinite plane, infinite plane, infinite plane. Doing my thing, do my thing, do my thing, do my thing. Infinite plane, yeah. I live on an infinite plane. I live on an infinite plane. They telling me different things. That's the supposed to be pulling the strings, but I know they playing the games. Since I found out today, I live on an infinite plane. I ain't playing no games. I'm on a different plane. I live on an infinite plane. Yeah. I know the news is fake. They're trying to choose my fate. I know the views is fake. They pushing the global stage. Fake news on the radio wave. All the hoax, the whole world is a stage. Body double like I'm Saddam Hussein. Doing my thing. Don't want the fame, just trying to make change. They took down my page. But an infinite gang, infinite plane, playing no games. Infinite gang, me ain't playing no games. Infinite plane, I'm on an infinite plane. Infinite plane, the world that y'all living is strange. Cause I'm on an infinite plane. I'm doing different things, yeah. I'm on an infinite plane. I'm on an infinite plane. I'm on an infinite plane. Stay with the infinite gang. Stop on the strings, but they can't fuck with the gang.